That'd be hilarious. That'd be so fun.
Hey, Manuel.
Hey, man.
Hello.
Hi.
Nice to meet you finally.
I know, right? Nice to meet
Yeah,
you.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to see you guys face to face. First time I speak with you. It's always through a keyboard and a screen, but here I can speak to you. It's cool.
Yo,
Same
that-
here.
it's like everybody's new normal. So pretty soon, hope
Yep.
things break out and get the
Right.
chance.
I like your cap. You've got it with your handle on it, your Twitter
Oh,
handle
yeah,
on it.
that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Nice.
Is this our first call with the 9 teams?
It is. It is.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think I
Yeah.
see that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it actually did show us all.
Yeah.
You're gonna make it 49 soon.
49 soon, yeah, right? 7 or 7. This could be high.
Mm.
So, but I wonder if they go past 49, like, does it have, I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
will
doesn't
they have,
even
like, a
make
second screen
sense,
or
right?
something?
Yeah.
Amazing what a bit of competition does for you. Just saying.
C4. I recently
You got a few flickers on your screen there. Okay, well, there you go. Okay, stop. Got a little nervous there. So this is our first like afternoon session like ever. We've never done this before, so
Mm-hmm.
this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So what time is it on your side?
It's noon, like
Noon.
11 for some of us and
Yeah.
12 p.m. for some
Well-
of us. Yeah.
12 for me.
Yeah,
And it's
11
5 o'clock for me, and it should be 6 o'clock for Manuel, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. 6 o'clock.
There's Matt.
Hello, hello.
Hey,
You're
sir.
a bit
Hello,
flickery,
hello.
Emmanuel.
There
You,
we go.
you keep flickering all over the place,
Yeah, I
buddy.
can see that it's because of the background effect. I don't know. Maybe if I go back to the blurry. No. Okay, wait. I know what it is. I have to plug my camera directly to the PC.
Ah, you got it through the dock.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got the
But,
same.
yeah. Okay, just wait.
Real quick.
Matthew is ready to give us an ASMR with audio now.
Right.
Okay, I'm almost recovered from my loss of internet debacle. So, who will present first today? Myself or Redcap?
I mean, either is fine. I know, Matt, you had something the next hour, right? So do you want to go first? Didn't you have something? You had a
Oh,
commitment, prior commitment?
that's been cleared because we chose the earlier meeting time. So
Oh, okay.
Okay.
that will be fine.
You
I'll
can
just
go
need another.
first, and then you can go first, and we can do Emmanuel second.
Okay, I'll just need about 2 more minutes to recover then.
Sure. Yeah.
First.
But we're almost there.
For those of you who join now, we will be starting, I think, in the next 1 or 2 minutes. I've already started recording, so that.
You have. Sancho. Good day, sir. Beth, welcome.
The two gods
Is
of
it okay? The
PowerAddicts
camera
Hangout.
now, Keith? The camera
Much
is okay
better.
now? Yeah.
Much better.
You're good. Yo, a lot of new names today.
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
beautiful.
I was
I'm so
just
happy.
gonna say that we are getting
Yeah.
new different time zones in today.
Yeah.
That
I
is
see more people. I don't know if they have joined from India, but I see some Indian names.
Mm.
Yeah. We
I
got
think
kicking
this-
apps here. Right? She's always kicking apps. Internet.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody, on my
Hey.
time zone here.
Hey, internet.
Good morning. So Michelle asks, is there a new special effect for Teams? Oh, it's new special effect for Teams. Yeah, I like it. Oh, you're talking about Emmanuel's flicker, maybe.
You know what I'm really after, Anton? I really want to be able to put my corporate logo like in front of everything. So depending on whether I've got my background or my foreground or whatever's going on, I want to be able to float my company logo up there.
Yeah.
I've not figured out how to do that yet. That would be cool.
So I think I
OBS.
think that you can make your own background and then put it in
OBS.
that
Yeah, I was
upload,
gonna do.
and it'll sit there.
Yeah, I did that, but I want it to. I don't want the halo, the blurry halo. I want to be able to just normal.
Oh, okay, I got you. Yeah.
Mm.
I'm gonna try OBS, as Viv says. I'll give that a go.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
Matt, how are you doing?
I just got it up and running again, so it's all good to go. I'm just gonna take a nice drink of water,
Take your time.
deep breath, and then you can start whenever.
It'll be fine.
Oh, come on, man! You smashed it the other week with that user group you went to. That was incredible.
That was a lot of fun. Thanks, Keith.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Right, Geeta, putting you on the spot, but really, did you go ahead and?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
Hello, everybody, and hope everybody's doing great. And we are excited to have this new time zone, so we're hoping that more of you can join us, and we hope to meet virtually more of the Power Addicts around the world. So, and today we have two special guests. Our first guest here is Matt, and I'm sure you all know him with his collections cookbook. He's the master of collections cookbook.
Yeah.
He's also the
He's
master.
a human. He's not a cat.
He's not a cat. Yeah. And he's also a PowerApps tipster. If you follow him, you will notice that he shares a lot of life hacks with PowerApps and super useful tips and tricks that you should know, whether you're starting with PowerApps or even if you're an expert or an intermediate. So be sure to follow him. That's this handle right there. And our next guest is Emmanuel. He's joining us from France, and he does some amazing stuff with components. If you followed him, you probably have noticed all the creative and innovative solutions he comes up with components. And today he's got something really cool to share with us as well. So we'll go ahead and give it all over to Matt, and it's all yours.
Awesome. So I'm going to start off by sharing my screen here, as we tend to do. Okay, and how does that display on everyone's screen?
It's
Sounds like a big question
mark. We see it.
in the PowerApps studio.
Yeah, there's a big question mark right in the center there. What could that be about? It's because I want to ask all of you a question to start this presentation. And that question is, what's the first thing you remember doing on a computer? What's the first thing you remember? If you're on the chat, go ahead and throw a message up there in the chat and let me know. Or maybe one of the hosts can play along and let me know what's the first thing they remember doing on a computer.
Control-Alt-Delete.
Control-Alt-Delete.
I think
Putting wrapping the sellotape around the tape port.
I hear a lot of good responses there, some humorous. Yeah, we're starting the computer right away because it's broken. But I think it was Vivek that said games. Isn't that right, Vivek?
Yeah, I said
Minesweeper, right?
Games. Yeah, Minesweeper.
Yeah.
Minesweeper, yes.
That's an absolute classic. And that's like the first memory I have with the computer too. Booting it up and playing a video game. This was back in the 1990s, okay? So we had like Windows 3.1 at that time, which is really, really basic. But those games really were the best of entertainment. And that's not just like an awkward transition. There actually was something called the best of entertainment. I don't know how many of you actually remember this, but there was this awesome compilation you could buy from Microsoft for about $30. And it had all the best games in it. There's a game called Chips Challenge, and it was a top-down puzzle game where you had to go around a maze and collect little computer chips. There was Ski Free. You're racing down a mountain at 100 miles an hour, trying to dodge trees and make jumps and get away from this vicious monster at the end. They had Jez Ball and Road's Revenge and Dr. Blackjack, which I used to earn a little bit of money at the Las Vegas blackjack tables, playing along with that. But in my opinion, one game stood above them all. And that game was called Pipe Dream. Pipe Dream. Who's heard of Pipe Dream before? Who plays Pipe Dream? Yeah, this game was pretty rad, right? So it's the stereotypical Battleship Gray, a color of the time. And what you do in this game is some fluid starts flowing outside of these pipes, and you want to keep on building the pipe as long as you can so the fluid can travel, the furthest distance possible. And you'd advance to the next level by getting a certain number of pipes. And there's a little bit of a strategy to it too, right? If you position the pipes just right or go through certain special pieces, you achieve a higher score. Okay. So this game, the concept is pretty basic. It's pretty simple. The graphics make it so that you could pretty much do it on any platform. So the question is, why not power-ups? Why not power-ups? So today I'm going to show you Pipe Dream, a game that me and my wife made in power-ups. But first, a little bit of an intro to me, your speaker. Geeta did an excellent job introducing me. My name's Matthew Devaney. This is a picture of me right there, back when we were all allowed to get haircuts. I'm getting a little bit of a bushy hair up top there. You can follow me on Twitter at MattBDevaney. I'm not a professional power rapper. I'm an accountant by day, and I just kind of do this as a hobby, coder by night. Spend a lot of time on the forums answering people's questions, and I am the creator of something called the Collections Cookbook, as Geeta mentioned. So, that being said, who's ready to see the game? Yeah, all right. Got a couple hands up. I forgot you guys are all on mute. I was waiting for the roar of the crowd. So here we go. This is PowerApp's Pipe Dream. Amazing. So this game is made completely in PowerApps, and these graphics were all custom made by my wife. She says that she used a program called Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Sketch in order to make these graphics. So I'm going to go ahead and play the game, and I'll choose my level here. I'm going to pick a little bit of a tougher one to show you more of the features. So I'll click Start. And there we go. So the game is started. So I've got to race and try and place these tiles on the board so that they kind of make sense. And in a couple moments, the water will start flowing out of them. If you want to see someone who's really incredible playing this game, I gave this to Sancho as kind of my play tester. And I think he had like a score of 1 million or something like that after a couple hours with it. It's really kind of cool to see him go. So there we are. Can't believe I actually pulled off playing this game during a live presentation. It's a little bit nerve-wracking. But we can see the water traveling outside of the pipe. And, in this cue to the left here, here's all of the tiles that are coming up next. So you can kind of see what's going on. I've got your score over here. This little thing here is called a pump. So when your water goes through it, it starts to travel a little bit faster, but your score gets multiplied by a factor of 2 greater because it's a little bit harder to play the game now, right? So we've got all sorts of pieces here, and it's just, wow, this water is coming fast. You can also kind of press this button here to speed up the water if you say, I'm done, and I think I have enough moves to complete the level, which is being tracked up top here, and the water just kind of fast forwards up to the top. There we go. Yeah, I'm going to make it. Hooray. So once you've completed a level, this little guy here who we've called Pete the Plumber says, do you want to go to the next level? You click OK. And then you'll notice that this time the tiles are in a totally different place. Like this board game is completely randomized. I haven't set up any of the levels in advance. It's all being done through PowerApp's code. Vivek, I saw you chuckle a little bit at Pete the Plumber there.
Yeah, it's just funny.
He has a little bit.
Any resemblance to any other computer game plumbers is highly coincidental. With his little Italian moustache.
Yeah, no doubt. And he has a little bit of a story to him too. As you might have noticed, when I click the try again button, he kind of dozes off to sleep. So this game is actually all going on in his head. Like he's a really dedicated plumber. He loves his job, and when he goes to sleep, he dreams about pipes and making a really good network of them. But just want you to know that he's not a lazy plumber. He actually just kind of, walked up over to a tree and leaned on it and just kind of fell asleep in the middle of his job there because he was working so hard. So, yeah, we've obviously really thought this through, right? So, yeah, that's what the game looks like. Any questions? 1 million questions. I see Aprez says really cool. Anton says looks like use of the random function, and that's completely correct. In order to shuffle these tiles to their correct spot, we used shuffle, which is just a variation on random. And Sancho says only 1 million. Okay, maybe it was in the tens of millions. But he's definitely got the high score for life.
So
So
I have a quick question. Like I'm
yeah.
first. I'm not a UI UX person by trade, right? But I've gotten to say some of these apps that we've been seeing, like people who do this on like as their on their daytime or their nighttime is like crazy amazing. So first off, the look and feel looks like I should be this should be on my desktop somewhere. So like hats off to that. But as far as the the challenges, what were some of the challenges that you ran into when building this game, and what are some of the key points that you could share with people who are new to building games?
Yeah, so I've actually got a couple slides queued up on that. But in terms of like what the challenges were, is for one, like how could I get these what the challenges were for one, like how could I get the water to start flowing through these pipes, right? Because that requires a little bit of animation, and that's just not something everybody knows, off the bat. How could I this game board is made completely of components. How could I make the game run completely in components, which is pretty cool. And then, how could I click on these tiles to get them to change, which is kind of an interesting feat in and of itself, because components can't really communicate with the outside world. What you put inside a component, if you click on it, it's just kind of encapsulated there. So how do you let it talk to the rest of the game? So those are kind of the big challenges there. But in terms of visual design, I credit my better half. She clearly did a
So it's not a
fantastic job of
gallery.
that. What's that?
Just to clarify, Matt, this isn't one big gallery.
Oh my gosh, no. I think a gallery would have made it about 10 times harder to figure out. Although I understand there are some people who are really good with galleries, probably such as yourself, who could probably have accomplished this. I found it a little bit easier to do as components.
You've
Yeah.
got to show us, dude.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so if someone could be so kind as just to let me know how many minutes we've got on the clock here, and I'll just
We've got another 10 minutes to go.
another 10 minutes. Okay. So let's slam through this a little bit. So first of all, what I want to show you is before we put all the graphics over top of it, like this was kind of my prototype, kind of what I built to. And I built it so you could just kind of throw the graphics on top of it. So when I press the play button here, I actually made this all with stock components in PowerApps. These component tiles are just, they're drawn with rectangles, and you kind of show and hide certain pieces of it based on which tile is being placed on the board. So I think it's just kind of good, first of all, to show that you could do it in kind of a less fancy way. But as I'm playing the game here, you can see that there's some toggles outside, and there's a little fluid finished one. So each time finishes, this toggle clicks and it advances it to the next one. And every time I press this button, the tile gets clicked here, and you can kind of see that some code executes. So how did I actually build this game? So I kind of put 4 steps to it. The first one is just the design of it. So this is the really fun part. My wife and I just took a drive out in our car, put our small daughter in the back seat, and we just started talking over all the possible games that we could build. And we thought about, hey, there's this game called Crystal Caves we used to play, Commander Keen, Cosmo, all this fun stuff. And we eventually settled on building a top-down maze game where you would go and collect gems as kind of a miner. But then I thought about it a little bit more, and it's like, okay, so is that fun? Like, what kind of makes a game like that fun? It's the sense of accomplishment for figuring something out, for being smart, and that requires you to make all sorts of puzzles. That sounds like a heck of a lot of work. That's crazy, right? So that game ended up being a little bit too big, so we went back to the start and eventually blazed through a couple other ideas and came to Pipe Dream. But there's kind of that cycle we were iterating through: figure out a concept, find the fun, and then make sure it's small enough so you can actually accomplish it. And also, when you're designing a game like this, it kind of has an audience built in. There's a few people on the call who I knew already know what Pipe Dream was, and we wanted to make it so that anyone who's played it before has that kind of nostalgic feeling over it. But we also wanted to make it something for kids, so that they'd like to. So some of the images, the bright colors and stuff like that, kind of plays to that idea. The second part of designing a game is proof of concept. Okay, so that's when you get out your notepad, you get out your PowerPoint, you start to sketch it out. What are all the things I'm going to have to do to make this app? And like Anton asked earlier, what are the challenges? Like you want to identify the roadblocks in advance, because you don't want to be all the way done building your app and then you find out, hey, by the way, like I can't actually build it. That'd be actually crazy, right? Like you don't really want to do that. So what do? You make this thing called a prototype, kind of a proof of concept. So I've got about a 5 or 6 minute demo here where we're going to do quick build, and I'll just show you a couple things that we did. And my mic is on, by the way, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I've seen this little blinking red light in front of me. It's kind of psyching me out a little bit. Okay. So I said that one of my challenges was I need to be able to build a component that encompasses all of the game pieces. So I'll show you how we did that. So I go over here to the components section of my screen, and I've done a very small bit of pre-work. This is just a square piece that's 100 by 100 in this component called grid tile, and I've made 3 properties. The first is game piece, so that says which piece for the game do you want to display? Is it straight? Is it like an elbow? Is it a cross? What do you want to show me? And grid X and Y, which is where the component appears like on the game board. So how did I actually draw this component? It might be a little bit more straightforward than you might have thought. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw a label up on the board here, and clicking on this label, where is the, well, I'm looking for the color thing here. Where's the color menu? Did I lose it somehow? Power Appers, help me out.
It's on the home. It looks like your buttons are moved. I thought on the home.
Yeah, it does that
Home is
sometimes.
shifted to the right, yeah.
Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you, Power Appers. Big save on the presentation there. For a minute, I was like, oh no.
There's something weird happening there.
Yeah, that's strange that the home would go to the very end. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
I wonder if you can move those around.
Is it?
Okay.
It's
Probably they
not
don't
like
like
the Canadian environments and they're messing around.
The Canadian environment, yeah. It's totally a backwards Canadian feature. You're right there. Next year, I'll be showing up en français, so get ready.
Right now I'm missing action on mine, so I think there's something definitely going on.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we're experiencing technical difficulties on the call. You might want to throw that title card up there, right? But as I've been talking here, you can kind of see what I'm doing is I'm building that very basic piece of the pipe. So I've made the base of the pipe, or the edges, and I've also made the center, which is just kind of a black piece right there, right? So now I'm gonna go and make the rest of it. So I can just copy my current piece like that. And what do you know? I'm getting pretty close to having, a straight down piece right here. Pretty cool. And can you guess what I'm going to do for the left and the right? I think you can. Everyone here on the call is pretty clever. I'm just going to take this piece that I've already made, and I'm going to do the opposite height and width. So you can see I'm really gaining like a little bit of efficiency right here by just reusing the pieces that I've already made. And of course you saw that my app, my finished product, like the graphics were really super duper complicated, but when you're in the prototype stage, you don't want to really go to all that trouble, right? This is just a proof of concept. You can add the fancy bits later. And finally, one more. Bring over this to the other side. And we'll have our right spot here.
I noticed you're using labels there, Matt, instead of rectangles. I'm sure there's a secret there as to why you would do such a thing.
The reason that I did it was because I didn't want to deal with all the properties like pressed and focused and all those sorts of things. I really just wanted it to be kind of a dumb piece. But Keith, do you have like another suggestion why people might want to use labels instead of rectangles?
For simply that reason, and you don't have to deal with all of that hover over nastiness and yeah.
Yeah, it really is a lot to manage, isn't it? So here we go. Now we have kind of our cross piece right here, and now I'm going to show you like how do you create all the game tiles based off of that. So you'll remember that I had a property called game piece. And so here is what I would actually write what I want to display. In this case, I want to display a straight piece, which is left to right. Okay. But I only want to display certain pieces of this component based on what's written in the property there. So what I'll do is I'll go to the visible property of those left right pieces, say grid tile if the game piece is equal to straight left to right, then show those pieces. But if it's, for instance, a different tile, let's say we're trying to make the two straight pieces just for saving us some time, right? Then hide those other ones. So if I switch between what I'm doing, then it only displays the pieces that I want, right? So the spokes on the cross, like you can configure them to show an elbow, a cross, a straight, basically any piece that you want. And it's all built into one component there. And so the final step, as always, is just to, oh, looks like I zoomed out a bit, getting a little bit click happy. So the final step is just to kind of throw that on the screen there. And I can throw two pieces, grid tile 1 and grid tile 2. I'll zoom out a little bit. There, PowerAddicts, you're really making me work today. And we can just fill in the piece I want right there. So yeah, that's part 1 there. Straight, left, right. Okay, got a little bit clicky. Perfect. Two pieces, 1 component. Perfect. So I think we got a little bit more time, right? If I want to show how to do the water animation really quick, that'll take about 5 minutes. Oh, if someone's not on mute there, if you could just let me know if I got the time there. 5 more. Looks
Yeah,
good.
we're good. Yeah.
Go for it.
I think we make any time for you at the moment, Matt.
Okay. Thank you for being so kind, Keith. So we're gonna display some water animating in these tiles, and this was one of the questions that Michelle Wong had, and she's on the call today. So thank you for asking the question. So here's how you build a little bit of an animation. So first of all, we need to see what the pipe looks like in order to build this, because we want to make sure the water fits inside of this pipe. So now I'll zoom in a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to animate the water moving left to right. So I just copied my previous piece there, and I'm going to make the water blue because that's the color that all good water should be, right? I think in the original game it was green. So we'll do water left to right. So that's what the water is going to look like after the animation is completed. The next thing we want to do is throw a timer up into the component. Okay. Timers are something that are used in all animations in Power Apps because they tell us what state the animation currently is in and how long the animation is going to go for. So in this case, I'm changing the duration of the timer to 3000, which means 3 seconds. So now the trouble is, how are we actually going to get the water to animate? Well, this is a solid rectangle, and what we want to do is increase the width over time. So what we can do is we can go to the width property of this, and we can say, look at the timer's current value, how many seconds are on the clock, and then what is the timer's total duration, right? How long does the timer go on for? And I'm doing a bit of math here, but really what I'm trying to do is find a percentage. Okay, so just like a progress bar, this thing is going to extend. And finally, once it's in its ending state, I want to make it as big as the grid tile. I must be typing something funny here because PowerAddicts is not liking it. So I'm going to go over to the side here. And there we go. There it is. Grid tile dot width. Perfect. And now when we go over to the next screen over here, I'm just going to change this to left, right as well. When I click it, there we go. Got some water going. Pretty cool, right? But there's actually one more step because the water can go into the right side of the pipe as well and move in the other direction. So how do we accomplish that? Well, in order to tell the pipe what to do, we have to make a new property, and that one is going to be called fluid entrance. And fluid entrance is going to tell the component which direction does the water enter from. And in this case, it's going to be either L or R for left or right. So now what are we going to do? We're just going to make one more modification to the water. So I'm going to change this X property here. So X says, like, where should I position this water? So if it's entering through the left, entrance equals left. I could use a switch statement here, but I'm going to just use an if. And the component should always be positioned at place number 0, right? The furthest to the left of the component possible. But if it's coming in through the right, and what I'm going to do is I want it to, a little bit of a tricky math here, but this first section says position the piece over all the way on the right, and then as time goes on, just keep on pushing the component over to the left as it extends. I think I need to do one more set of brackets here because there is a lot going on, and that should clinch it. Okay, fingers crossed, everybody. Like, live coding demos are always a little bit hairy, so I hope I've got it here. Wish I had a little.
It was fun to watch, Matt.
Yeah, I really like doing them too. I find them entertaining as well. If I had a drum roll, I'd cue it up right here, but I'm going to press this one. It's going to go left, and this one's going to go right. We got it.
Very cool.
I'm a little bit excited that we did that and accomplished it. But so what's happening there again? It's just taking a look at is the water coming in from the left or the right, and it's taking that rectangle piece and pushing it over to the side. And if you download the game and you dig through the guts, you can see how all that works for yourself. I've got just 2 more slides here to wrap it up. This will be fairly quick. So once you've actually done your prototype and you figured out all the most complicated parts of the game, then it's actually time to build it. And if you did the prototype, if you did the proof of concept stage right, you probably have a little bit of a plan. But you know what? Things don't always go according to plan when you're building a Power App. Like, you hit roadblocks from time to time. So what do? Well, you can go onto the Power Apps forums. You can ask a question there of the audience. You can ask a friend. What I like to do sometimes is just go back to the actual Power Apps documentation itself, because I find when I'm figuring out things for myself, they tend to stick a little bit better. But you always have to trade that off with the amount of time you have with building the app. So that's kind of your choice there. I don't like to drag these things on. I like to stick to a certain timeline when I'm building my apps. I think that's important when you're building a game, just like when you're doing this professionally, because at some point, like, you're going to add too much scope, or you're just not going to have enough time to get it done. So it's always important to do that. And of course, you want to make sure that you do a play test. Like, test it out with someone who plays games. Test it out with someone who doesn't play games. See what their reaction is. Like, do they actually pick it up and play it again? Like, I think that's super important. It's not just for bug squashing. It's like, is this game actually fun? And finally, did you think we were done once we build it? No, it's actually time to go out there and promote it. Like, you did a good job. Like, you want people to see it. So there's a couple places where you can post your game. The best place is probably on the PowerApps official site gallery. There's this great thing called the kids section, which Sancho is heading up. And you can post your game up there, and there's already kind of an audience built in. So it's a wonderful place to post it. The second place is Twitter. Just make sure that you use the proper hashtag so people know it's a PowerApps game, right? Hashtag PowerApps, hashtag PowerAddicts. But I do find there's a little bit of an art to catching people's attention when you post it there. There's a lot of awesome stuff going on in the community every given day, and you're lucky just to get a sliver of that attention. So I find what helps is get some nice graphics on your tweet there. If you can do a little bit of a GIF showing some animation, that tends to catch people's eye. And just make sure your messaging is super clear. Like, just tell people what it is. Don't, get too flowery with your language. Just get to the value, like, right away. Like, let them know what the value of your app is and why they're gonna have fun playing it. And since our little plumber has gone to sleep here, that's the end of the prepared remarks. So just want to say thank you, everybody, for having me on this call. I've wanted to do this for quite a while, and it's been tons of fun. It's great to be here.
That was so cool, Matt.
That was amazing. Thank you so much for showing that to us. Yeah, I'm just amazed every time I see a new game. The amount of seems simple here, but the amount of work spent on it is quite complex.
It
Yeah,
is.
I really like how in your game you just have one component.
Yeah,
The component itself, the concept of component itself is to be able to reuse, but you kind of just have this concept of inception, like reusability within a component that's being reused, which is just amazing. Like, when you look at it, even though the app looks like, oh, there's this complex stuff going on with all the X and Y axis and the pipes moving back and forth, but then when you look at the guts of it, just like how you showed us, it's just one simple component with properties and then a little bit of math wrapping around, and then there you go. You have a excellent game that you can play with.
Yeah, that's
Thanks for destroying my night, Matt. Cheers, because I'm not going to sleep now because I'm going to be playing with this.
Productivity has gone to zero, right, Keith? It's
totally, man. You forget any work being done for the next 48 hours.
You just got to beat my score, Keith.
Yeah.
No, I'm not worried about beating your score.
Only like 44 trillion.
Yeah, I mean,
but if I
hacked it, Sancho, I'm just saying.
But if I have a little bit of a call to action, like to Gita's point, right? There's all sorts of things going on in this app, but it was built off of like all sorts of really like little simple things, right? Mm-hmm. So just take it a step at a time, and just focus on the vision. And I think eventually you'll get there. This game was built in the course of, 2 weekends for me, just while my kid was asleep, and then I actually had to take my kid out of the house for one day while my wife did the graphics. Had to do 8 hours of babysitting. So, but if you give yourself a little bit of time and just break it down into really small pieces, I think you can achieve some amazing results with an app like this, or like an actual business value app. So
can I just make sure I understand your background? You are an accountant by day and a power apper by night.
Yeah, like Batman.
You are amazing. You are amazing, yo.
We've got
a nickname now for Matt, the Power Batman.
the power Batman, yes. Wow.
Yeah.
Another touching story. I mean, seriously, this is crazy. All right.
So how long did it take you to learn Power Apps, being an accountant by day and doing this part-time and with kids and running a household?
I'd say to the point where I got like decently comfortable. I'd say like a couple months, actually, if I'm being quite honest. The big thing that really turned up my game was learning about collections, and I built that thing called the Collections Cookbook. But that wasn't until about 3 months in. Like, I wasn't doing anything too crazy until then. I was really just trying to get the basics down. But I've always been the type of guy who comes home at night, and I don't always turn on the TV, and I like getting on the computer and kind of building things. So that kind of drove me to my end goal there.
Well,
so hopefully
thank you, Matt. Yeah. thanks for taking the time to share what you've
Yeah.
built so far. with
I'm
everybody.
excited to see what Redcap's got for us. I'm a big fan of his. So I'm going to turn off my webcam here.
Yep, it's all yours, Emmanuel.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
can't wait to see what you've got to show us.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah. I just learned that there was a kid zone in the forums. I didn't know. Never noticed it. Nice to know. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me here to your hangout. I'm really thrilled to meet people I've seen behind a screen on Twitter, on LinkedIn, etc. And talking with you is really nice. Next step, I guess, is we meet in person. I don't know, maybe in a few months after the lockdown is really finished. I mean. Well, today I wanted to share with you something much more serious than what Matt just showed us. It's absolutely not a game, much more serious, but that you might probably find interesting. It's been a project I've been working on lately for a customer, and I wanted to share this with you to show you what you can achieve with PowerAddicts. So let me share my screen here. There, just tell me if you see it correctly. Everything's fine. Yeah, it's good. Okay. What I want to walk you through is there was this customer who came to us to say that he installs he does various installations of satellite antennas around the world, and he needs some field engineers to go on site, do some installation reports. But when he showed me the installation report that they were using at the moment, using Word documents, there were about 200 data to enter in the Word document. So it was really a huge report to fill in. And I didn't see myself creating 200 columns in a SharePoint list. So I thought I would make something much more dynamic. And finally, without even noticing it, I ended up creating an application which allows you to generate a form dynamically just by setting up some entries in some SharePoint lists. And that's what I want to show you today. So first of all, I wanted to, I took a few snapshots of some parts of the report that the field engineers had to do before in the Word document. So here's the first snapshot, a second snapshot. So as you can see, they have to enter some data in the yellow parts here. You see, enter some numeric values. Sometimes they have to choose an item from a list here like this, and they choose an element from a list here. And sometimes they have checkboxes, etc. And so since there were a lot of these questions, I thought I'd do something much more dynamic. So what I first did is that let me just take here. Okay, what I did is I firstly, oh yeah, something else. In the report that the field engineers had to fill in, sometimes they had grids like this because, for instance, here they need to specify what is the status or give some comments on some equipments, and they don't know how much equipment there will be on each site. So it's a dynamic list of equipments that they had to enter here in the Word document. And I also find a way to reproduce this inside the PowerAddicts application, and I'll show you how. But firstly, what I like to do with you is to show you how I kind of cut out all the pieces of the form, the initial form. Firstly, a few naming conventions. The gray part here, I called it a topic. The sub part here is called a subtopic. And then what you will see here, all the bug power, the bug PSU, etc. These will be considered as report items. Okay, and of course. Here, the yellow parts where the people enter their values will be the report content. Okay. Also, for this example, for this extract of the report, you will notice here that the report items are, for instance, here you have to measure the if cable loss, for instance. And this is another report item. So each time there is a place where you're supposed to whether check a box or enter some data, it's considered as a report item. Okay. And then again, here the report content will be then here the checkbox, for instance, which is related to the measure the IF cable loss, and the yellow parts here for each of these items. Okay, these are the report content. That's what I call report content, the actual values. Also, you will notice here on this case and on this part of the report that these three report items are grouped inside one group. And so I also found a way to reproduce this in the application. So inside the application, you are able to group the report items together and give a name to your group here. Okay, so all these in fact are groups, and you will see them exactly as is inside the PowerApps application. Now about the data model, for the topic, I just made a list called topics with a name and a description. For the subtopic, I just created a list with a name for the subtopic and linked the subtopic to a topic. Okay, so this is pretty simple for now. Next, I needed a list to have the list of report items. So the items again are a little bit kind of questions in a report or in a okay. They're like questions. So they belong to a report type. I will speak about that again a little bit later. And a report item is attached to a topic and a subtopic, of course. For instance, bug power here is a report item which is attached to the VSAT system parameters topic and the outdoor equipment subtopic. Okay. Then you will have a group name, what I was just talking about here. So this will be the name of the group. A position, if you want to order your questions or your report items to specify an order of appearance in your report. Then you will have the label. So this will be like bug power or inspect all cables condition. This will be the label. An eventual description. I will show you in the application where you will see it. A hint text, like maybe here you see that you have to enter value in decibels. So under the field where you will enter the value, you can specify that you have to enter the value in decibels. So this will be considered as the hint text. And then you will specify the type of item. And in the type of item, I will show you the different type of items you can create later, but globally you can create items like text or numbers or checkboxes or choices, etc. Okay, and if you specify a choice item type, then you will specify which choice it is. Okay, and list the values, but I will show you that a little bit later. And of course, there also, as you saw earlier, there are grids, and you will be able also to specify grids for a specific item. You can specify if an item is required, if it's read-only, if there is a default value, or if it has comments attached to it. Okay, let's go on. Once you have the report items specified here, you have to store the data that is entered by the field engineer. And this will be stored in the report's content. So a report content is attached to a report. It is attached to a report item, of course, and you will have the value stored here. Okay. Now, about the comments here, as you can see below each item here, there is a comment. So instead of creating an item for each comment, I created a property here for the item called with comments, and which will automatically activate comments attached to the item if you want to enter comments for the item. Okay, and it will be stored as a content in the comments column here. Now the reports content has to be linked to the list of reports. So if I go to this site in France and to do my report, I will create a report item here. So this represents my whole report where I will enter the content and the values. So it's attached to a report type. So I can create many report types with different items in it. And it can be also attached to a customer eventually, and of course attached to linked to a field engineer, so that when I go into the application, I only see my reports. It is also attached to a site because I go to various sites where there are installations where I have to do my installation reports. There is a date for the report, eventually other data, and of course a status, a date of submission, and lasting date. You must know that the application that I developed also manages the offline mode, because most of the time the field engineers will be in regions where you will not get any connection to the internet. So the application preloads all the necessary data at first, and then you can go wherever you want, work in offline mode, and then synchronize your report with SharePoint to SharePoint. Okay, so this is globally how I designed the data model for storing all data for these report items. And then there is the special case of the grid. So for the grid, again, there is the topic, the subtopic. These are the grids. As you can see, there are similar grids which have the same columns. Okay, so this is the same grid. And inside the grid, you will have a grid item. Okay, so this is one line in the grid is known as a grid item. And this grid here, its content will be attached to a report item, and the one below here is another report item. So this report item will be of type grid, will be related to the specified grid, and will have the specified columns. Here you have the grid columns, and all of these will be specified in various SharePoint lists. And of course, you will have the content when you enter some data in a grid, create a new item, you will enter some data, and they will be stored in a list called grid content. And again, on the data model part, you will have here a very simple list to reference all grids, and then specify the grid columns that are part of a grid. So for instance, here you will have 4 columns, one called equipment type, another one for manufacturer, another for serial number, and the last one for comments. And just as the report items, you will be able to specify what is the type of the column. So you can create a column of type text, number, date, choice again, etc. Okay. Now the grid content is stored inside the grids content list. So content is what is an item ID, which will represent the item in the grid. It will be linked to a report and a report item, which is the blue one here or the yellow one here. Okay, that's the report item. And the value, of course, will be stored. So for instance, if I choose here antenna for equipment type, so antenna will be my grid column here. And for equipment type, the item ID will be 1 for the first item of my grid. And the report item will be the yellow report item. Okay, and all of these will be, of course, connected. The grids content will be connected to a report, so that I can link together the grids content with a report. So if I go to this site and do my report, all the data that I will enter into a grid will be linked together with that report. Okay. And of course, in fact, the red elements, the red columns that you see here are lookup columns. That's why I show you how they are related to the other entities here. Okay, so that's a lot of inputs for you, a lot of data model. It's a bit complicated to detail this data model, but that's how it was designed. And then, as you remember, there was sometimes you could choose values through a drop-down list, and these are totally customizable as well. So this is considered as a choice. These are the values of the choice. So I created a list called choices, where you just list the different choices that you eventually have in your form. And the choices values are stored into a choice values table, which links to the choice, of course. And you can specify a hard-coded value that will be stored into the report, the label that will be displayed inside the drop-down list, and eventually have an obsolete flag to say that the value is eventually not to be displayed anymore inside the drop-down list. Okay, so that's how the global data model looks like. I'll just remove here and fade the entities that are not really relevant here for today. So these are the topics and subtopics list that we just saw earlier. Here you have the choices entities to list to manage the choices. Here you have the grids and the grid columns to describe how the grids are structured. Then you will have here all the reports related entities, the one that lists all the reports for all field engineers, the one that describes the content of a report, and the one that lists all report types. And finally, you will have here the two lists that will store the contents, one for the contents of the classic report items, and one to store the contents for the grids. Okay. Well, I think that's enough for a data model, and maybe you're kind of getting tired already looking at all this. So maybe the best thing to do is go and have a demo of what it looks like in real. And
just so you know, Emmanuel,
yes?
the curiosity is just building up. Everyone's excited to see. They're all like, something is coming our way, and we know it's going to be awesome. I mean, if the data model backing up your solution is this cool, then we can wait to see how the actual solution is.
Yeah, sure. I'll just show it to you. So here's the demo coming. So since the application handles the offline mode, and it's in PC desktop format, so you have to use the PowerAddicts desktop application to make the offline mode work correctly, because offline mode doesn't work on a web navigator. Okay, it works on phones and the desktop application. So I'm going to start the application here, and there was a tricky part where, of course, to handle the offline mode, you have to first load. The first time you start the application, you have to connect to the internet so that the application can connect to SharePoint and retrieve all the data from SharePoint and store it locally. Once this is done, you can only work with the local data and eventually synchronize later on. Okay, so this screen is just an admin panel that is supposed to disappear in the final application. I'll just start the application, and here we'll have a first step where the application has to load a whole bunch of lists, get the user data information, load the data that are stored locally, load the data that come from SharePoint if I'm connected, and then make a little synchronization between all these lists and determine which data will be used effectively inside the application. So it loads everything up, and you have a kind of a log here where you can follow up what's happening and see what's being loaded. And once everything is loaded, you get to the application where you will see all the reports that are attached to your name, to your account. So these two reports, for instance, are reports attached, that were attached to me. Okay, and so you can see the name of the customer, the site where I'm supposed to do the installation report, the date of the report, and its status. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the report here, and so I'm on site. I open my laptop, start the application, and I want to start my report on site. So I click start, and on the next screen. Okay, so what I did here is that I just going to go back here. I reproduce precisely the first example that I showed earlier, right here. Yeah, this one. So as you can see here, you have a portion of the report that was VSAT system parameters with all these elements that the field engineer was supposed to enter, and I reproduced it here. So you will have here in this on this screen, you are inside the form, and the form is generated totally dynamically. So you will have the list of topics here from your form. I mean the gray parts here, VSAT system parameters, installation actions, you will find them here, okay? You will find then for each topic the list of subtopics, okay? So for instance, VSAT system parameters has one subtopic called outdoor equipment, and installation actions has cabling subtopic here, okay? And then when I go to a topic and subtopic, it will load all the setup from the SharePoint list and generate on the screen here, and in fact show and hide the controls according to what's been set up inside the SharePoint lists. So here and then, for instance, here an equipment expiry date, you can enter comments, okay? And so here you will enter your values, just like that. So these are numeric values. You cannot enter a text, of course. And here you will have a choice where you will have the list of values that you set up inside your SharePoint lists. So all that you see on this screen is dynamic. I mean, is generated or on the fly and based on what you've set up inside your SharePoint lists. Okay, even the values here, etc. You can enter date. As you can see here, for this this item here, I specified the description for this item, and if then it shows you a little eye here icon. Clicking on it will show you the description for the item, giving some explanations how you're supposed to enter your value, for instance, etc., etc. You will see here the little hints I was talking about that is shown right under the field where you enter the values, and you can enter here comments, which are rich text, which is rich text. Okay, and then you save all this, and once it's saved, then if you go back to the list of your reports, you will see that now your report has changed its status. Now it's open, and I've started to enter some data into my installation report, and I can just continue it. It will reload the local data that's on my PC, even if I'm not connected. And if I want then to push the data to SharePoint, I will just need to synchronize it using the synchronize button on the home screen. And so I will click here on the synchronize button, and then it will push all the data that is stored locally on your PC to SharePoint. Of course, the synchronize button is active only if you have a connection to the internet. Okay. And so this is so if I show you the SharePoint site. So this now it had been synced, and if I go here to my reports content list, I will see all the data I just entered, and so it will tell you for this report and for this report item, this is the value that was stored. Okay, and I have here all the lists that you've seen earlier in the data model that will allow you to specify the list of choices that you want in your form, the list of values for each choice. And I've not set up any grids here, and I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to show you how you can specify the grids, for instance. So I'll do it this way and take this. Okay, so this is the grid that I want to reproduce into my form. So I will first create a new grid called physical inventory. Okay, so this is just the name of the grid. Okay, and then I'll go to the list where I will describe the columns of the grid, and I will add a new column. Okay, so I'll choose the grid I just created earlier. The position of the grid, so this is, I'll go from 5 to 5. The column name will be equipment type. Okay, and I'll say, so this is a choice, all right, and I'll have to specify a choice. So if you need to specify a choice, you can just go to the choices here. So you will see how you can create your own choice. Equipment type. So this is the equipment type choice. Now the choice exists, and I'll just set up the values for it. So I'll create a new entry here, call it antenna, and this is the equipment type choice, and the value will be ant. This is the value that will be stored, but the label I want antenna. I'll create another one. I'll just create 2, so it doesn't take us too much time. For instance, the TX cable. Okay, so I'll store TX and TX cable here. Okay, so now I have 2 values. So let's go back to the grids column here. And so this column that I just created, and that was called equipment type. So I said it was a choice, and so I'll specify, okay, this is the equipment type choice I want. Okay, I save this. And then I will create another, I'll just create the 2 columns. I'll create another column here for the manufacturer or the serial number. Let's say I'll do the column for the serial number here. Still on the same grid, I'll put in second position. Column name will be serial number, and it will be a number. I save this, and well, that's about it. Now my grid exists. I specified what are the columns of the grid. I'll just go to my report items to specify that I want a new item in my form. And first, I'll just make a new topic here. Since we are on a new topic, I'll create a new topic, which calls physical inventory. And it's attached to the installation report. And then I'll create a new subtopic where I don't even need to specify a subtopic. I don't have to. I'll just go then to the report items, and inside the report items, so I'll create a new item. So I'll specify that it's for this installation report report type. It's for this topic. I don't have any subtopic. I don't need a group name. I don't need a position. I'll specify a label. So here it will be physical inventory. Okay, and I'll specify that it's a grid. And when you specify it's a grid, then you can choose which grid will be displayed. Okay, I just save this, and that's it. Now I can go back to my form. Go back here. I'll leave the application and reload it so that it reloads the new data from SharePoint. Okay. I get back to my home screen, and then clicking on continue report here, I'll go back to my report. And as you can see now, I have a new topic. Since I created just a new topic, I will click on it. I don't have any subtopics, and it will automatically show a data table showing the 2 columns I just created into the SharePoint lists. And I will have buttons to allow the field engineer to enter some data. And I will just click add a new row. It will generate dynamically here the list of columns where I will be able to enter my different data. As you can see, you see the values of the choices I just created a few seconds ago. Enter my serial number here. There, I can add another one, etc. And this is unlimited. It allows you to create dynamically as much data as you want, since it's a real grid. And you can save this. So saving it saves it locally only. And going back to the home screen, if I synchronize it again, it will push it to SharePoint. And inside SharePoint, I'll finish with this. There you go. Well, you will just need to go into the grids content list, and you will see the data that I just entered in the 2 grid items, which are numbered here. It's the first item of the grid, first line of the grid, and the second line of the grid with the data I just entered. So as you can see, using a few lists that are smartly connected together, I was able to create an application where all the content of the form and the report are generated totally dynamically. And behind the hood, in fact, what happens is that I used here a gallery where I have the various controls here. So I have a text input, I have a date picker control, I have a drop down, and they show up whether the item is a checkbox or a text input or etc. And that's how I made it work. I'll stop now because we're a little bit late on time. So this is what I wanted to show you, what you can achieve with PowerAddicts and make things look like dynamic and really do interesting stuff. So I don't know if you have any questions.
It's like after 1 o'clock, and we are all still here, like hanging on. This is like amazing. The funny part about it is, like, you know, there's always there has sadly been a CBS crew, and there's been a SharePoint crew, and it's so cool to be able to see. And each person has their own commentary about the two, right? But it's so cool to see that you've really taken SharePoint and have completely they tricked it out to make this a it lives on its own to a certain degree. It's very dynamic. So I think it's very, very, very impressive. As everyone has said, it's impressive.
It's interesting that you talk about CDS because, in fact, I was approached by Microsoft because they heard about this solution and they wanted to implement it into CDS and attach it to field services, because that's what field services is for, and they're interested in seeing a solution like this that is customizable, fully customizable for field services. Yeah, so you're right. Yeah,
I think that's right, but you've got to be careful. Like when you're doing this if you were to take this on CDS, one of the problems you're going to have is around offline, because you've got to rebuild those relationship stacks internally. So if you're building that, like you've got the kind of the answer there going into a SharePoint list, you've got to then rebuild those relationships, and that's the challenge. Like doing it in SharePoint is a lot easier because you're writing in effect textual fields and you're controlling just text, which is a lot easier to write. Whereas if you've got to go and pull all those relationships and maintain those relationships in the app, it's really, I'd be very interested to see how you did the offline functionality writing back in SharePoint. I'm pretty sure it's similar to CDS. Lots of loops.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
It sounds like we need to get Matt back. Emmanuel back to do a round 2.
Yeah, for sure. I think anyone who's we had Shane at our user group on in London, and he was showing us some pretty cool tricks for using collect just to kind of like do mass data dumps and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, offline is certainly where it's at the moment.
Say, Matt has a quick question.
Yeah. First of all, like, Emmanuel, amazing work. Like, this was just insane. This is so great. Like, how long did it take you to build this solution, would you say, from concept to what we have today?
It took us 25 days.
25 days. And
25 man days. Yeah.
25 man days. How long would you say it takes to put a new survey into the app? I know you just showed us, but how long would you say, like, on average, it would take to do that?
Well, this is the interesting thing about it is you don't need the application to create a new survey. You go to the SharePoint list.
Right.
You create a new you create a new report type. You create the items attached to that report type. You create the choices you need. You create the grids you need, and then you just start the application, and there it is. Yeah, that's all. The whole point of it. Yeah.
It's very data driven rather than app driven.
Yeah. I'm just trying to puzzle through, like, I wonder how many hours you've saved, like, your company there. Like, there must be some calculation there of return on investment. It must be pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Great work. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
This was fantastic. Yeah, I like
part 2 for this, man.
Yeah. I liked how you had the loading. It was a great use of showing context to the user around what's happening while the app is initiating or doing all the stuff that it needs to do to bring the data or processing all the data. It kind of just shows you step by step on the side, so you know what's happening. It just keeps them informed while they're just waiting and looking at the spinner or the progress indicator, right?
Yeah.
So that's the.
I must admit that at first I did it for me because there were about 17 SharePoint lists to load from the local storage, and then 17 lists to load from the SharePoint side, and then compare them, update the data inside the local storage. And so I needed to know what was happening, how much items were loaded from the various lists. So I said to myself, I might as well put a kind of a log on the side of the screen so I can see what's happening when the application starts up. And finally, you're right. It's a very good insight for the customer or for the user to see what's happening when the application loads. It's true. And what I did also is that you didn't see it, but I'll just start the application again. If there's any other questions, meanwhile, I'll show you what I did on the loading screen, so you can stop it and prevent it from going directly to the home screen, because as you saw it, it's automatic. Once all the data are loaded and it reaches 100%, it directly goes to the home screen. But I said to myself, I need a way to stop this and pause it if I want to have a look at what's really happening. So you just click, it's a hack. You click on the version number here. And so it stops the application from going to the home screen. So you can have a look, how much grids content did it loaded, etc., and see if there was any problem. And also implemented a way of going into a kind of admin mode. So
it's
you
kind
can
of like your debugging mode, your own
admin
debugger.
kind of,
yes, the utility, debugging utility that you just
exactly.
to me.
And the idea is that when you enter the code here, so the code for today, because it's a code that changes every day. In fact, you take the year, you add the months and the day, and you multiply it by the number of the week. So every day it changes.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So,
and so
Someone's
the
been doing
version
Excel.
number.
what?
Someone's been playing with. I see macro writing in your past.
And so once you enter the right code, then you're in admin mode, and then it shows you a debug button. And in fact, this debug button can be very handy sometimes, because then it brings you to another screen where you can have a look at the local data on your device. What's coordinate, and so you can see what's
locally.
exactly, because otherwise you don't have no way to look at the cache. And so that's how you look at the cache. You can eventually clear it or delete some items if you need to. And you can also look at the data that is loaded from SharePoint directly, but then the buttons are disabled, so you don't mess with the data on the SharePoint side. And so this is a little trick I did, so I can, and also when you're in admin mode, you can force click here and on this one, I guess. If I go back here and then just click again, so it will reload and go back to the home screen. If I'm still in admin mode, you can in fact simulate the fact that you lose the connection by clicking on the icon in the right hand corner, because otherwise you don't have any way to check that.
Wow.
So here, you see, for instance, you can just, and then when you're in offline, you cannot submit your report, and you cannot synchronize it, of course, to SharePoint.
Yep. So is it a bunch of patch behind the scenes in your app?
There's a lot of patches. Yes, that's right. It's all patch. In fact, there is not even one form control in the application, since everything is dynamic. You see, so
and it keeps it light too, because you don't have to have several screens in your app. It's just like a single. It's kind of like in the programming world or in the coding world, we call it a SPA, which is a single page application. So it just
exactly.
Similar to that, it's a SPA app.
Apart from the loading screen, you have only two screens: the home screen and the form screen, and that's all. That's it.
So how are you error handling? Because it's so dynamic, right? When you're patching,
no errors. It works perfectly right.
That's how cool PowerAddicts is, right?
Well, error handling. The only thing I do is that every time I do a patch, I check for the if everything went well. Otherwise, I show up. But it's true, I haven't had the time yet, because the time frame was too short. I haven't had the time to set up a real log to store eventually information of what happened. I was counting on using the how is this called again? You can use the trace function, to trace what happens in your application inside Azure. There's some place in Azure where
instrumentation key.
Instrumentation key. Yeah.
So you got to make that offline as well. Once you go down that rabbit hole, it's a bloody deep one. I'll tell you that for nothing.
That's right.
This is just fantastic. I think this is just amazing. And several people on the chat were mind blown, and everybody felt like this was an eye-opening solution.
Okay, cool. I was afraid it was too serious.
How are you handling the one question I got is around number of questions. So with that sort of like arbitrary 2,000 max limit, how are you saying that you've got all those questions in that particular record? Are you flagging to the user and saying, hey, look, you can't add this one. You can't have any more if you've got like a big, say you've got 16 big questionnaires you've got to take out with you, each one with, I don't know, 300 questions in them each.
Yeah. Well, in fact, we didn't take the time yet to consider the fact that we could go over the 2000 limit. So for now, we were thinking of implementing, we haven't done it yet, but we were thinking of implementing a flow that would execute every week or so and move the finished report with their data to archive lists. So we can keep them, but out of the main list so that they don't go over the 2000 limit. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that has kind of become like the approach to overcome that pitfall of, moving items of like completed status or whatever the business rule is. So you kind of fall within the 2000 limit category. But sometimes it's not applicable for all solutions, and that's when CDS and SQL and other data sources come into play.
You always got that with this, Geetha, because it's offline, So it's you've got to you have to really think on your feet about how much you're going to allow them to take with them when they go out into the field.
That's true. That's a great point. Yeah, I think everyone is interested to see how the app is doing stuff behind the scenes, and then how the offline stuff works.
Well, it would take about 25 days to explain it to you, but
we don't mind it.
We can make it a series.
Yeah, we should make it a series.
Maybe just a few things, but on the loading screen here, in fact, on the invisible event that I load all the data from the local source.
Tenant has sorry, I just noticed something. Yours has so when you hit the properties, yours is grouped. I don't see that on. Is it more like on the European tenant?
Oh, it's because I enabled the new formula bar.
Okay.
There's if you go here, it's still an experimental feature, but I love it.
Yeah, so, I remember seeing that.
Right here, you have it here, enhanced formula bar.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's why. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed, but maybe not. But usually the formula bar starts from about here, which overlaps the 3 dots here when it's fully opened. And it goes way up to the right side of the screen. But I used a small plugin in Chrome called StyleBot, so I can crunch it right into the border here of the right panel.
You, and I want to marry you.
Look at that. That's why we need to look at your app.
Honestly, this is really handy because then you can just swap to any.
Yes, because every time you have to collapse it, go back and do your work and come back. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'll make
what
some
was that again? StyleBot? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
If you want, I can even let me check. Yeah.
So there's a class that you're just setting. Yeah.
I'll just copy paste the CSS you're supposed to put in it, and then it works.
Wow. Yep.
This is really handy.
That's nice.
That is amazing. Thank you. Thanks for the snippet there.
So on the in the invisible event of the screen, that's where, as you can see, the code is pretty well. There's a lot of it because the fact is that you have also to manage the display of all the progressing reading of the list, etc. It's a gallery where I have to add items in it, etc. But globally, I determine here how much items, how much lists I'm going to read and load, so I can manage the progress bar to 100%. So I know that I have 11 lists that contain structural data, and I have 3 lists that contain content data. So according to the fact that I am connected, I have a connection to the internet or not, etc., I determine how much lists I am going to read and update, etc. And I calculate the number of steps here, so I can calculate the value of the progress bar, etc. And then I do it in various. I have about 3 main steps. Firstly, I load all structural data from the cache. This is all this part. Then I load all structural data from the source, from SharePoint. And once I've done this, I update the local structural data from the one I loaded from SharePoint. Then next step is I load the reports from the cache. I load the reports from SharePoint, and I do kind of a small synchronization so that I detect if there are new reports that I'm supposed to store locally or stuff like that. And that's about it. But it's a lot of code, repeatedly code. Yeah. But yeah. So that's how I do the loading part. And this is just a gallery here where I connected to a collection that I fill in when I go through all the steps. Then the other screens are not too, the home screen is very simple. It's a small gallery here that will list the various reports. And then the main screen here. So here I made a component for displaying the list of topics. I used the same component to display the list of subtopics. Okay. And globally, this part here, the part that really generates dynamically the content of the report is just a gallery, in fact. It's one gallery. And inside the gallery, I don't know if I can show you. How can I show you? Let me check if this is the, phone groups. Let me just do this. Just need to load the screen with some data. Yeah, like that. Okay. So not this one. Okay. So in fact, there are two galleries. The first one is the one that allows to create groups. As you remember, maybe sometimes in the report, the questions are regrouped together. And so this first gallery is for the groups. And then inside, I have the gallery with the questions, the items, in fact. And in there, I just have a label for the label of the question, the item. And then you will see here, I have a text input, a combo box, a date picker, a checkbox. And these are the 4 controls that are made visible or invisible according to the type of question. So that's globally how it works.
Wow, yeah, there's lots of golden nuggets there that we've all learned from your demo, and just from how you work with as an app maker, you use the tool by itself. So I think it's super resourceful. But thank you, Manuel. Thank you for all the time, and thank you for all these super useful tips and demo. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely was a great session. I mean, I don't know, probably you had a lot of sleepless nights, because I don't know if you guys feel like me. Sometimes you're trying to figure something out and you can't figure it out. You go lay down and you're like, oh wait, I got it, and can't go to sleep. So it seems like a very good thing. Thank you for your time, and it's very nice.
Yeah, thank you for your time also. Yeah, it was my pleasure.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us. We hope this time worked a little better for the European regions, and I'm hoping the Asian time zones as well. And we hope to continue to change things a bit. But thank you all, and stay safe out there.
All right.
Thank you all. Bye-bye. See you next time.
Yeah. And we need Vivek.
Yeah, I just sent him a note. He should be stopping the recording anytime now. Sweet.
I just wanted to say thanks for what you guys do. I'm new here, so I think what you guys are doing is amazing. So, as a newbie, I want to just say thank you to you guys for everything you guys are doing. So,
oh man, it's not a problem. Like, we all started from the bottom, and we would all come together to share our experiences. So if you ever stuck, man, and you feel like you need some help, use the hashtag. Someone is always looking. and someone's always here to answer. So, and don't think that whatever you're experiencing, you are the only one that has experienced it, because we're all experiencing the same thing at different times. So, man, just
Yeah, we've all been there and done that, and and we're all still learning. I mean, there's always something new to learn every day, and especially like on these calls when we watch our guests show stuff, we're like, oh wow, we didn't even think about it that way.
yeah,
Yeah, I created my first kind of like app recently, and on my phone it wasn't uploading a document, right? So I was like, man, what's going on? I get an error. Documentation was very good, right? So according to the documentation, you can only upload a file that's no more than 10 megabytes.
Yeah, that's a limitation, right? Yeah.
Right. So I didn't know that, right? So I'm researching, and I found an article Microsoft has. It says you cannot upload anything more than 10 megs. So again, the documentation is good there, and but it helps me remember because I'm troubleshooting it, right? So you can't forget that for the next time.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'm excited.
it's all good, man.
That's
Hey,
awesome.
we are here. We are here. And look, we'll still bounce questions off you as well, because we all, like I said, we all are learning. And a lot of us, like like my like who said earlier, most of us our day jobs are not SharePoint, are not Power Apps. Our day jobs is something totally different. And so we all, get in after hours and just go at it. So yeah, don't feel bad, man. We'll be asking you questions too. So because you may see some things that we haven't seen, because you are a new set of eyes. So yeah,
Hmm.
definitely we all leverage each other, man.
So where are you joining us from, Angel?
Florida.
Florida. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah. So I'm on the east.
Cool.
I'm on the East Coast. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yep, I'm on the
Yep.
East Coast, so it's nice. I just got into the Power Platform. It's been really like I've gotten to follow certain people and looking
Hmm.